Cubism. Two artists of 1910 era felt that a new artistic style needed to connect with the modern audience and to reflect the struggle of modern life. The inspiration by postmodernist Paul Cézanne Cubist artists deviated from the three-dimensional perspective that had been norm in art since Renaissance. They instead of that painted two-dimensional figures from multiple perspective to convey the sense of totality and a uniquely modern way. Cubist artists simplified natural forms into geometric shapes like cylinder, sphere, and cubes. So it has made a revolutionary new approach to representing reality, invented in around 1907-08 by artists Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. They brought different views of subjects, usually objects or figures, together in the same picture, resulting in paintings that appear fragmented and abstracted. Cubism was one of the most influential styles of the 20th century. It is generally agreed to have begun around 1907 with Picasso's celebrated painting Demoiselles d'Avignon, which included elements of Cubist style. The name Cubism seems to have derived from a comment made by the critic Louis Vauxcelles, who on seeing some of Georges Braque's paintings exhibited in Paris in 1908, described them as reducing everything to geometric outlines, to cubes. Cubism opened up almost infinite new possibilities for the treatment of visual reality in art, and was the starting point for many later abstract styles including constructivism and neoplasticism. By breaking objects and figures down into distinct areas or planes, the artists aimed to show different viewpoints at the same time, and within the same space, and so suggest their three-dimensional form. In doing so, they also emphasized the two-dimensional flatness of the canvas instead of creating the illusion of depth. This marked a revolutionary break with the European tradition of creating the illusion of real space from a fixed viewpoint using devices such as linear perspective, which had dominated representation from the Renaissance onwards. What inspired Cubism? Cubism was partly influenced by the late work of artist Paul Cézanne, in which he can be seen to be painting things from slightly different points of view. Pablo Picasso was also inspired by African tribal masks, which are highly stylized, or non-naturalistic, but nevertheless present a vivid human image. A head, said Picasso, is a matter of eyes, nose, mouth, which can be distributed in any way you like. Types of Cubism. Cubism can be seen to have developed in two distinct phases, the initial and more austere analytical Cubism, and a later phase of Cubism known as synthetic Cubism. Synthetic Cubism is the later phase of Cubism, generally considered to date from about 1912 to 1914, and characterized by simpler shapes and brighter colors. Synthetic Cubist works also often include collaged real elements such as newspapers. The inclusion of real objects directly in art was the start of one of the most important ideas in modern art. Analytical Cubism ran from 1908 to 12. Its artworks look more severe and are made up of an interweaving of planes and lines in muted tones of blacks, grays, and ochres. Cubism in architecture. In theoretical rules, Cubist architects expressed the need for dynamism, which would prevail over the essence and peace contained in it through a creative idea, in order the result to cause a sense of expressive plasticity. This should be achieved through the shapes obtained from pyramids, cubes, and prisms, positioning and comparison of sloping surfaces, mainly triangular, sculptural facades in crystal-like protruding elements, similar to the so-called diamond-faced ting or even cells that resemble late Gothic architecture. Thus, all surfaces of the facades, including pediments and attic windows, have their form. Grills, as well as other architectural ornaments, acquire three-dimensional shapes. Besides this, new forms of windows and doors, for example, hexagonal windows were created. The birth of Cubist architecture. Cubist architecture had a pretty spectacular start. At the Autumn Parisian Salon in 1912, a group of authors exhibited a large, 10 by 3 meters, model of a Cubist house. The facades were designed by a French sculptor Raymond Duchanvillon. Room interiors, they could be seen from the other side of the model, were designed by several people, among whom the main person was a French painter and designer André Mayer. The rooms were fully furnished and small Cubist paintings hung on the walls. After Paris, Cubist House was shown at the Armory Show in New York. Shortly after this event, the first erections of Cubist architects appeared. But they were not in Paris. Original Cubist architecture is extremely rare. There is only one country in the world where Cubism really applied to architecture. This country was called Bohemia, now Czech Republic, especially its capital Prague. Czech architects Josef Krest, Josef Gochar, Pavel Janek, Otakar Novotny were the first and only ones in the world who ever designed the original buildings in the style of Cubism. Moreover, during these 3 years, Czech architects have created a lot of Cubist furniture and interior items too. Cubist architecture flourished mostly in the 1910 to 1914 years, but the buildings in the Cubist style, or at least, under its influence, were also built after the First World War. After the war, an architectural style called Rondo Cubism developed in Prague. It was a combination of Cubist architecture and round shapes. The end of Cubism in architecture. In general, the Cubist architecture was a failed, might have been project, and it's pretty easy to understand why. In the mid-1920s, the founders of the modern movement developed new principles of architecture, invented it anew, from scratch. In the early 1910s, Cubists only figured out how to decorate or diversify it in a new way. Modernists were building a new unprecedented world, paradise on earth, and were pretty serious about it. The social ambitions of Cubists were mostly limited to the dream of wealthy collectors. Cubists were reforming the art and didn't crave for more, but modernists were twisting the world inside out.
The structure is known as Unit d'Habitation, which is in Marseille, France. In this structure, Le Corbusier proposes to condense of an area, vertically, and build these large units as independent small autonomous neighborhoods. He developed an anthropomorphic system of proportions and dimensions which reflects as a characteristic of Cubism. He created several different types of apartments in the same building, from studios for single people to double-stored residences that spanned across the building. All of them used the same configuration, 3 floors, 1 interior hallways. This is very efficient because 2 hallways feed 6 actual floors. All apartments have the terrace, and every terrace has different color which depicts the Cubism. Cubist art has established itself firmly the innovative perspectives, and completely different techniques. It has the stunning outputs which became part of artistic heritage, inspiring such outgrowths as Futurism, Constructivism, Dada and Surrealism. Cubism was the most influential artistic movement of the 20th century.